Let's go on now to our big NDTV exclusive, how China is expanding a high-altitude airbase which is just about 200 kilometers from the Pangong Lake. That is one of the sites where Indian and Chinese soldiers are presently facing off in Ladakh. What we can actually tell you now is of the construction of additional areas in an airbase in Tibet. This is the Nagari Kunsha airport. The reason we are telling you this is to give you an idea of its location, just 200 kilometers from the Pangong Lake in Ladakh. The Pangong Lake is where the first skirmishes between India and China took place on the 5th and 6th of May. But what we will now show you in this Nagari Kunsha airport is active Chinese construction activity over the last several weeks. So let's bring up that first picture. This is the first image of the 6th of April 2020. Now this shows you what could be any other airfield. It's an Air Force base, it's dual use, it's at an altitude of 14,000 feet plus. It's the 5th highest airfield in the world. There are civilian flights here as well, but military aircraft are known to operate. So nothing untoward. This is just in April. But a few weeks later, the second image shows you a different picture. You may not be able to catch this with your eye, but this picture of May is very different. Why do I say so? Let's put the two images together. And once you do that, you can see that the bottom right circle on the right hand side, the picture of the 21st of May, has the construction of an additional track that could either be a tarmac to position helicopters or a second taxiway being constructed. And the circle on the right, on the top, actually indicates the airfield construction activity, a lot of land activity taking place. Now look at the picture on the left, which is just a few weeks earlier on. None of that is taking place. And now this is the big image coming up next. This image, and all of this was provided to us by Det Resfa. He is an incredible analyst with Shadowbreak International. Is this. These are 4 Chinese fighter aircraft. They are either the J-11 or the J-16. They are very similar to India's Sukhoi 30 MKI. They come from the same family of aircraft. However, the Chinese have reverse engineered them and built them in China. This is the first time that high resolution images of these aircraft in this Nagari airbase are actually visible. However, they were spotted, according to experts, in December as well. But what we are showing here is the first high resolution image of these fighters in an airfield, which are just a few minutes flying time from the disputed area in Ladakh. All in all, as we talk about the ground position in Ladakh, let's not forget that air activity could also intensify given the location of this airbase and the Chinese fighter aircraft deployed there. Well, joining us now, a very special guest, Lieutenant General S.L. Narasimhan. He's a member of the National Security Advisory Board, a distinguished fellow at the Center for Air Power Studies. And I know him as one of the finest minds in the Indian Army when it comes to issues regarding China. It's a pleasure speaking to you. Would you agree, General, that the present India-China standoff at Ladakh is perhaps the worst boundary tension since Kargil?
Thanks, Vishnu, for that introduction. I wouldn't say that it is the biggest one next to Kargil. Probably it is. You can compare it with what happened in Dolam in 2017, and this is even less than what happened in Dolam at that point in time. So I would say yes, there is some increase in the troops in that area compared to normal kind of face-offs that take place, but it is not to the levels of, say, Kargil.
General, there have been all sorts of reports and speculation about the numbers. Some say the equivalent of 2 divisions of Chinese soldiers are there. That would be what, upwards of 15,000-20,000 soldiers. They don't call them divisions anymore, but that's a separate point. What is your understanding of the numbers the Chinese have deployed?
In fact, it will be wrong to actually assess the numbers. Numbers will never be accurate in such situations. That is number one. Number two, when people claim thousands of people or thousands of soldiers are deployed there, they should also know that how much space they occupy, how they are to be administered. Those things are also to be kept in mind. I get a feeling that people haven't analyzed these things in detail. So therefore, I won't put a number to the number of troops that are there. However, it is definitely not in terms of what has been mentioned in certain reports as 5,000 and 10,000, etc., etc.
General, the violence which we've seen on the banks of the Pangong Lake on the 5th and the 6th of May, ANI had a report today that Chinese soldiers came up as if they were in swarms. 70 odd Indian soldiers were beaten up, badly injured. Apparently batons were used. Some had wire on them. So could you tell us a little bit about this violence? There have been fist fights in the past. We know that happened. Soldiers push around. Was this far more violence than we've perhaps seen ever? Of course, we've had wars. That's a separate issue.
I do understand that point. If you take your mind back to 2017, when Dolam issue was actually on, at that time also you had another incident in the same place in Pankung So, where you found pushing and pulling taking place. Stones were being thrown at that point in time. This is not the first time that it is happening in the area of Pankung So. That is point number one. Point number two is these kind of face-offs have been happening earlier. This time, I am sure that the aggressiveness was more. And it is not to say that the aggressiveness was more because of certain issues. Basically, the point that we need to take away from here is the interaction between the face-offs in these areas vary between pushing and pulling to less than opening fire. So to that extent, we need to keep this range in mind, and the activities are taking place within this range. Yes, there have been a bit of more violence. There have been injuries to both the sides. Those, I am sure, could be avoided. But the issue is that there is a range into which these are fitting in.
General Narasimhan, I think further north in the Galwan River Basin area is the big concern. This is where the Chinese have apparently come a few kilometers inside with the bulk of their force behind their own line of actual control. And I think what has been reported is that a road which we constructed last year going up to Daulat Beg Oldi is something that bothers China. And I think the biggest concern now is, will China actually withdraw back to their side of the LAC? Because if they don't, then what are the options for India? We either hold our ground or we push them back. Pushing them back means war.
I will cover 3 points as far as this is concerned. First is the Darbuk-Shiok DBO road, yes, which has actually been constructed recently, is very well on our side of the line of actual control. So there's no doubt about that particular issue at any point in time ever.
Yeah.
If you take your mind back to 2013, in the same area, you had, not in exactly the same position, but in the same area, you had another standoff which lasted approximately about 3 weeks. I'm sure you are aware of that and you remember that. So the change that has happened this time is, there are 2 things. One is the kind of force level that has increased in that area. 2, the kind of again, the interaction that took place in that area was little more aggressive than what it was in 2013. The point that we need to keep in mind is, these talks take place on ground, people negotiate, it takes time. So that is one thing that we need to understand. That is point number 1. Point number 2 that we need to understand is that at the ground level, when the tactical level the talks are going on, you also find at the government level and at the diplomatic level, the talks are also going on. So it's a simultaneous process that takes place, which involves all hierarchy of the government, the armed forces, etc., etc. The third thing is, as far as how to deal with the situation is concerned, it is a professional decision that has to be taken by the armed forces on the ground. So we should leave it to their professional judgment, and we should back them up fully to carry out their task.
Yeah.
Whether they'll be able to go back, whether they're not going back, that is a question that will have to come much later. But my request is, it may not be so good to analyze each and every event that is happening, like a meeting taking place or some movement that is taking place. These are all part of an overall plan. And also, if you look at the kind of build-up that takes place, please understand, when such face-offs take place, both the sides will cater for some reserves. So those reserves will in any case be nearby to enter into the operations whenever it is required. So let us not make a big issue of it. These things do happen on ground. Face-offs are nothing new. In any case, 2 points I want to convey more. One is that India will ensure that whatever infrastructure that we need, we will continue to make. That is number one. Number two, we are very confident and sure that we will defend our sovereignty and territorial integrity. But at the same time, we also want peace to prevail. We want to resolve this peacefully and through talks, etc., which could happen on ground at the diplomatic level or at the government level.
Just a quick comment, if you will, sir, on our story of the Nagari Air Base, which has seen a lot of construction activity in just the last few weeks. There are 2 satellite pictures, one from the 6th of April, one from the 21st of April, and fighter jets deployed. Now, the fighter jets may have been there earlier on, but I think it's the 2 pictures of the expansion of the airfield within a few weeks which is perhaps of more concern. Your views or thoughts on this, sir?
The first point I want to convey on that, I saw that report of yours. I was reading it before I came into this interview. The thing that happens is there are 2 things that we need to remember. One is this airport is nothing new. It was there earlier. The aircraft was there earlier, as you yourself have said it. Second thing is there are some additional construction is going on. We'll have to wait and watch as to what this construction is for. In any case, we have, as you yourself have said, there have been no increase in the number of aircraft that has come up. You talked about J-11 and J-16. J-11 is a indigenous version, Chinese version of Sukhoi 27. J-16 is the version of Sukhoi 30. So these are aircraft which are there, which have been there earlier for the exercises, etc. Please also understand this is also the period in which the armed forces do exercises. This is summertime. In those areas, it is easier to do exercises. You will find certain amount of movement. We need to keep that in mind and analyze it properly.
Okay. General, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us with that standpoint, giving us a perspective of what's happening on the ground. One final question, General. You know, is it your sense that this is going to take time, that we've had about, 8-9 rounds of talks at the commander level. They've not resulted in any breakthroughs as yet. So therefore, are we likely to see this continue for a while before there is some resolution, and hopefully a diplomatic one?
I think so. It will be extremely difficult to place a timeline on it. But however, as the people are talking, the things are likely to improve, and thereafter there may be some decision that may be arrived at. But it will be very, very difficult to put a time frame on this at this point in time.
All right, General Narasimhan.
Hope that this entire issue,
right.
Hope the entire issue gets resolved peacefully.
Right. Well, General Narasimhan, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your views on that situation in Ladakh at this stage. Thank you very much indeed, sir.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.